The stars looked peaceful tonight, but Jake Morrison knew better. He stood on the bridge of the New Horizon, watching the enemy's ships through the main screen. The Syndicate fleet hung in space like dark metal insects, their red lights blinking. In the darkness, his own coalition ships surrounded them, white hulls gleaming under the light of distant suns. 247 years. That's how long this war had been going on. Jake's grandfather had fought in it. His father had died in it. Now Jake was here, 32 years old and tired of killing. "Sir, we're getting a message from command," said Lisa Rodriguez from her station. She was young, maybe 25, with brown hair tied back in a military bun. Her hands moved quickly over the control panel. Jake nodded. "Put it through." The screen changed to show Admiral Helen Carter. She was an older woman with gray hair and sharp blue eyes. Behind her, Jake could see the bridge of the flagship Aurora. Officers moved around quietly, their faces serious. "All coalition forces, this is Admiral Carter." Her voice filled the bridge. "The peace talks are finished. Both sides have signed the ceasefire agreement. After the centuries of war, it's over." Jake felt something heavy lift from his chest. Around him, his crew looked at each other with surprise and relief. Some smiled. Others just stared at their screens. "All ships will power down weapons and move back to safe distance." Carter continued. "The Syndicate forces will do the same. Joint patrols will begin next week to make sure everyone follows the rules." The communication ended. Jake looked out at the enemy ships again. Already, their weapon systems were shutting down. Red targeting lights went dark. The glow from their engines grew dimmer as they began to move away. "Lisa, power down our main guns," Jake ordered. "Yes, sir." Her fingers danced over the controls. "All weapons offline. Shield generators reducing to minimum power." Jake walked to the big window that looked out into space. The coalition fleet was huge. Hundreds of white ships with blue markings moved slowly through the darkness. Each one carried thousands of people who had been fighting this war for years. Some had never known peace. The war had started over mining rights in the outer systems. The coalition wanted to keep them free for everyone to use. The Syndicate wanted to control them. What began as an argument became battles. Battles became bigger battles. Soon, entire star systems were fighting. Jake remembered his first battle 7 years ago. He had been so scared his hands shook. The Syndicate ships had looked huge and dangerous. Their weapons lit up space with deadly red beams. Coalition ships fired back with blue energy blasts. When it was over, 12 coalition ships were gone. The Syndicate lost 15. Nobody won that battle. Nobody won any of the battles, really. They just kept fighting and dying and replacing the dead with new soldiers who would fight and die too. "Sir," Lisa said quietly, "what happens now?" Jake turned from the window. His crew was looking at him, waiting for an answer. These people had followed him through 3 major battles and dozens of smaller fights. They trusted him to know what came next. "Now we go home," he said. "We go back to our families and try to remember what peace feels like." But even as he said it, Jake wondered if that was possible. He had been a soldier for so long that he wasn't sure what else he could be. What did peacetime officers do? How do you go back to normal life after spending years preparing to kill or be killed? The communications officer, a young man named Paul Kim, spoke up. "Sir, we're getting reports from other sectors. All coalition and Syndicate forces are following the ceasefire. No shots fired anywhere." Jake nodded. That was good news, but it felt strange. For the first time in his adult life, there were no enemy targets to track, no battle plans to review, no weapons to maintain for the next fight. "Set course for home base," he ordered. "Standard speed." As the New Horizon turned away from the former battle zone, Jake thought about all the people who had died in this war, millions of soldiers from both sides, civilians caught in the fighting, entire colonies that had been destroyed because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. The coalition had fought for freedom and democracy. The Syndicate had fought for order and control. In the end, both sides were so tired and broken that they just stopped fighting. Nobody really won. Nobody really lost. They just agreed to quit. "Sir," Lisa said, "my sensor readings show something strange." Jake walked over to her station. "What kind of strange?" "There are some signals coming from outside the galaxy, way out on the edge of our sensor range. Ships maybe, but they're moving really fast. Faster than anything we've seen before." Jake frowned. "Syndicate ships?" "No, sir. The energy patterns are completely different. Not coalition either. These are something else. Jake stared at the sensor display. After years of war, the idea of unknown ships made him nervous. How many ships? Hard to say, sir. At least 50, maybe more. They're still too far away to get a clear reading. Keep watching them, Jake ordered. If they get closer, let me know right away. As the Coalition fleet headed home, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The war was over, but the galaxy suddenly felt less safe than it had when they were fighting. At least with the Syndicate, they knew what to expect. These new signals were a mystery dot far behind them. The unknown ships continued moving through space at impossible speeds, heading toward the center of the galaxy where their exhausted civilizations were celebrating the end of their long war. But the celebration might be premature. The real war hadn't even started yet. 3 months passed since the war ended. Captain Ben Davis was having the best time of his life. His ship, the Endeavor, was exploring new star systems instead of fighting battles. No more shooting, no more death, just discovery and science. Ben loved his job now. The Endeavor was a research ship, not a warship. It had laboratories instead of gun turrets, scientists instead of soldiers. They were mapping the outer edge of the galaxy where nobody had gone before. Captain, I'm picking up something weird, said Amy Clark from the communications station. She was a small woman with red hair and green eyes. Amy had been with the ship for 2 years, and she was very good at her job. Ben walked over to her station. What kind of weird ships, sir? Lots of them, coming from outside the galaxy. Amy pointed at her screen. They're moving really fast. Faster than anything in our databases. Ben felt his stomach tighten. After months of peace, the idea of unknown ships scared him. How many ships? At least 100, maybe more. They're spread out across a wide area, but they're all heading toward Coalition space. Ben sat down in his captain's chair. The Endeavor was alone out here, days away from the nearest Coalition base. If these unknown ships were hostile, his small research vessel wouldn't stand a chance. Amy, try to make contact with them. Use the standard first contact protocols. Amy worked at her controls for several minutes. I'm sending out mathematical sequences and universal greetings, sir. If they're intelligent, they should respond. They waited. The bridge was quiet except for the soft hum of the ship's engines. Ben watched the sensor display as the unknown contacts got closer. Their ships were moving in perfect formation, which meant they were definitely not random space debris. Captain, Amy said suddenly, I'm getting a response. Put it on the main screen. The view screen flickered and changed. Ben expected to see some kind of alien creature. Instead, he saw what looked like a human being. The figure was wearing a dark blue uniform with strange markings. He had short gray hair and sharp brown eyes that seemed to look right through the screen. This is Admiral Roy Campbell of the Earth Defense Force, the figure said. His voice was calm but carried a tone that made Ben sit up straight. We've been monitoring your communications. We understand there's been some kind of war in this area. Ben blinked in surprise. The universal translator was working, but it seemed to struggle with some of the words this person was using. This is Captain Ben Davis of the Coalition ship Endeavor. The war ended 3 months ago. We've never heard of Earth or your defense force. Campbell smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. That's because you haven't been looking hard enough. We've been watching your little conflict for a while now. When we heard you were calling it a war, we decided to come out and see what all the noise was about. I don't understand, Ben said. Who are you people? Where do you come from? We're humans. Captain, we come from a planet called Earth, about 30,000 light years from here. We've been wondering when someone would notice us. Ben looked at his crew. They all seemed as confused as he was. Our databases don't show any record of humans or Earth. Campbell laughed, and the sound made Ben's skin crawl. Son, your databases don't show a lot of things. We've been fighting wars since before your species learned to make fire. When we picked up your communications talking about this galactic war, we figured it was time to introduce ourselves. The war is over, Ben said quickly. Both sides signed a peace treaty. There's no more fighting. Campbell's expression changed. His smile disappeared and his eyes became hard. You call what you've been doing a war? Captain, we've been monitoring your battles for months. You people have been playing soldier, not fighting a war. I don't know what you mean. I mean that, in 200 years of fighting, you barely scratched each other. Your casualty reports show maybe a few million dead on each side. We lost more people than that in single battles back home. Ben felt cold. Single battles? Captain, let me explain something to you. Where we come from, war isn't about making points or showing flags. War is about winning. When we fight to end the conflict completely and permanently. We don't do stalemates. Behind Campbell, Ben could see part of the human ship's bridge. Every surface was covered with weapon displays and tactical screens. The crew members he could see all moved with the quick, efficient motions of people who had seen real combat, were peaceful explorers now. Ben said, "We don't want any trouble." Campbell leaned forward. "We're not looking for trouble either, Captain. We're looking to help. See, when we heard there was a war going on out here, we got excited. We thought maybe we'd finally found someone who knew how to fight properly. And now we're disappointed. But don't worry, we're going to fix that." The transmission cut off, leaving Ben staring at a blank screen. Around him, his crew looked scared and confused. "Amy, give me a direct line to Coalition Command," Ben ordered. "Priority 1. "Yes, sir." While Amy worked, Ben thought about what he had just seen. The human ships on his sensors were unlike anything in the Coalition databases. They seemed to be built from different types of metal and technology all mixed together. But they moved with perfect coordination, and their energy readings were enormous. "Sir, I have Admiral Carter on the line." "Helen, this is Ben. We've made contact with an unknown species. They call themselves humans, and they're claiming to be from something called Earth." "Humans?" Carter's voice sounded puzzled. "I've never heard of them. Are they hostile?" Ben thought about Campbell's cold smile and hard eyes. "I don't know, but I don't think they're friendly. They seem to think our war was some kind of game." "How many ships?" "Over 100 that we can detect. Maybe more." "Helen, these people scare me. The way they talk about war. It's like they've been doing nothing else their whole lives." There was silence on the communication line for a moment. Then Carter spoke again. "Ben, return to base immediately. We need to inform both Coalition and Syndicate leadership about this." "Yes, ma'am." As the Endeavor turned toward home, Ben watched the human ships on his sensors. They were still approaching Coalition space, moving in their perfect formations. Whatever these humans wanted, Ben had a feeling that the galaxy's brief period of peace was about to end. The war between the Coalition and Syndicate had been like children playing with toy soldiers, compared to what these humans might bring. Ben just hoped that when the real fighting started, there would be something left of civilization to save. The emergency meeting at Harmony Point Station was unlike anything in galactic history. Representatives from both the Coalition and Syndicate sat in the same room, not as enemies, but as confused allies facing something they didn't understand. Admiral Helen Carter looked tired. She had been reading reports about the humans for 3 days straight, and none of it made sense. Across the table, Syndicate War Marshal Crix clicked his mandibles nervously. The insect-like alien was known for his calm in battle, but even he seemed worried. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," Carter said, looking at the intelligence reports. "These humans claim to come from a planet that doesn't exist in any of our star charts. They have technology that our scientists can't identify, and they think our 200-year war was just practice." Intelligence Officer Rachel Price nodded. She was a thin woman with black hair and dark eyes. "That's correct, Admiral. According to their own communications, they've been fighting wars continuously for over 10,000 years. Crix made a sound like grinding metal. "Impossible. No species could survive that long in constant warfare. That's what we thought too." Rachel continued, "But we've been monitoring their radio transmissions. They have over 500 different words for war in their main language. They teach military strategy to their children in school. Every adult male and most adult females have some kind of military training." Carter rubbed her forehead. "What do they want?" "That's the problem, Mom. We don't know. They keep saying they want to help, but they won't explain what kind of help." The door to the conference room opened, and a Coalition guard entered. "Admiral, the human delegation has arrived. They're requesting permission to come aboard." Carter looked at Crix, who nodded. "Send them in." 3 humans entered the room. The leader was a tall man with silver hair and cold blue eyes. He wore a simple gray uniform with no decorations, except for a single star on his collar. Behind him came 2 younger humans, a man and a woman, both carrying what looked like small computers. "I'm General Carl Stone," the leader said, not bothering with formal greetings. "These are my assistants, Colonel Dan Ross and Major Kelly White. We're here to discuss your security situation." Carter stood up. "General, I'm Admiral Carter of the Coalition Fleet. This is War Marshal Crix H of the Syndicate. We appreciate you coming, but we're not sure what you mean by security situation. Stone smiled, and Carter felt a chill run down her spine. Admiral, you've got automated defense platforms left over from your war. Nasty things. They keep shooting at anything that moves. Your people have been trying to shut them down for months without success. The Cerberus platforms, Crix H said, his voice careful. They were our most advanced defensive systems. We lost many ships trying to disable them after the ceasefire, right? Stone said. Sitting down without being invited. We'd like to help. You with that problem. Carter remained standing. How? Those platforms have adaptive shielding that learns from every attack. They've resisted everything we've tried. Stone looked at his assistants. Colonel Ross opened his computer and showed them a display. The screen showed detailed technical information about the Cerberus platforms that Carter had never seen before. Where did you get this data? She asked. We've been watching. Stone said simply, your platforms are impressive, but they have a weakness. They're too smart for their own good. What do you mean? Major White spoke for the first time. She was a small woman with brown hair, but her voice carried the same cold confidence as Stone's. The platforms adapt to each attack by changing their shield frequency, but adaptation requires processing time. If you hit them with the right sequence of attacks, you can make them adapt in ways that create vulnerabilities. Crix leaned forward. That's theoretically possible, but the calculations would be incredibly complex. It would take our best computers months to work out the proper sequence. Stone laughed. Marshal, our kids play video games more complex than your best military simulations. We've already worked out the sequence. We just need your permission to demonstrate. Carter looked at the human general with suspicion. Why do you want to help us? Because those platforms are a navigation hazard, Stone said, his smile disappearing. They're shooting at everything that comes near them, including our ships. We don't like things shooting at us. You could just avoid that area of space. Stone's eyes grew hard. Admiral, we don't avoid problems. We solve them. The room was quiet for a moment. Carter could feel the tension in the air. These humans spoke about violence the way normal people talked about the weather. If we give you permission, Carter said carefully, what exactly will you do? We'll remove the platforms, Stone said, permanently. How many ships will you need? 3 should be enough. Crix H made his grinding sound again. 3 ships, Admiral. We lost entire fleets trying to disable those platforms. Stone looked at the War Marshal with something that might have been pity. Marshal, you were trying to disable them. We're going to destroy them. There's a difference. Carter made her decision. Very well, General. You have permission to attempt to destroy the Cerberus platforms, but we'll be watching. Of course you will, Stone said, standing up. In fact, I insist on it. You need to see how this is done. 6 hours later, Carter watched from the bridge of her flagship as 3 human ships approached the Cerberus platforms. The automated defenses came online immediately, their weapons charging with enough power to destroy a small moon. The platforms had been built to be invincible, with shields that could adapt to any known weapon. The lead human ship was commanded by Commander Linda Foster, a woman who sounded bored as she spoke over the communication channel. This is Foster to Observation Fleet, beginning attack sequence. You might want to step away from your windows. What happened next changed everything Carter thought she knew about warfare. The human ships didn't try to overpower the platforms or outrun their weapons. Instead, they fired a series of shots that seemed random, but were actually carefully calculated. Each shot forced the platforms to adapt their shields in specific ways. The first shots were absorbed easily. The second wave made the shield stronger against energy weapons, but weaker against physical projectiles. The third wave exploited those weaknesses while creating new ones. In less than 10 minutes, the platforms that had cost both sides millions of lives were nothing but floating debris. Foster's voice came over the comm again, still sounding bored. Platforms neutralized. Threat eliminated. Any other problems you need us to solve? Carter stared at the wreckage on her screen. The demonstration was over, but she was beginning to understand that everything was just beginning. These humans didn't just have better weapons or faster ships. They understood war in ways that her people couldn't even imagine. The galaxy had spent centuries learning how to fight battles. The humans had spent millennia perfecting how to win wars. And now they were here, offering to help with that same cold efficiency they had just demonstrated. Carter wasn't sure if that was a blessing or the beginning of the end. The destruction of the Cerberus platforms sent shock waves through both the coalition and syndicate governments. Emergency sessions were called. Military leaders demanded answers. Scientists worked around the clock to understand what they had. Witness. Dr. Nick Roberts sat in his laboratory on the Coalition Science Station, staring at the data from the human demonstration. He was a xenobiologist, someone who studied alien life forms, but the humans were unlike any species he had ever encountered. This doesn't make sense, he muttered, pulling up another display. The energy readings from their home system are off the charts. His assistant, Dr. Sarah Kim, looked over his shoulder. What kind of energy readings? Weapons testing. Massive weapons testing. They've been conducting military exercises that make our largest fleet battles look like children playing with toys. Nick pointed to the screen. Look at this. They turned their own moon into a target range. These scorch marks here, they're from weapons that could crack a planet in half. Sarah sat down heavily. They've been preparing for war their entire history. Not just preparing for war, Nick said. They've been perfecting it. Look at these communication intercepts. They have military academies on every inhabited world. They teach strategy and tactics to their children like we teach mathematics. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, Coalition Intelligence Officer Rachel Price was making discoveries that terrified her. She had been assigned to decode human communications and translate their databases. What she found kept her awake at night. Admiral Carter, she said over the secure communication link, I need to report something important. Carter's face appeared on the screen. The Admiral looked tired and worried. What is it, Rachel? I've been analyzing human communication patterns and historical records. Ma'am, they're not exaggerating about their military experience. According to their own records, they've been fighting wars continuously for over 10,000 years. That's impossible. No civilization could survive that long in constant conflict. Rachel shook her head. That's what I thought too. But it's not constant conflict between different species. It's constant conflict between themselves. They've been fighting each other for their entire recorded history. Carter leaned forward. What do you mean? They have detailed records of something called World War I, World War II, hundreds of smaller conflicts, civil wars, territorial disputes. They've never had a period of true peace longer than a few decades. How do they survive as a species? That's the scary part, Admiral. The wars make them stronger. Every conflict teaches them new ways to fight. Every battle improves their technology. They don't fight wars to destroy each other. They fight wars to become better at fighting wars. Carter was quiet for a moment. What else have you learned? They have over 1,000 different military ranks and specializations. They've developed fighting techniques for every possible environment. Space, land, sea, air, underground, even fighting in the vacuum between stars. Rachel pulled up another file. Here's something that really worries me. They have something called the Geneva Convention. It's a set of rules about how to conduct war humanely. That sounds positive. Admiral, they needed rules to make war more humane. Think about what that means. They've been so good at killing each other that they had to create laws to stop themselves from being too efficient at it. The implications were staggering. The Coalition and Syndicate had fought for centuries without ever developing rules for war. They had simply tried to win with minimum casualties. The humans had become so deadly that they needed laws to keep their wars from destroying everything. On the Syndicate side, War Marshal Crickstage was receiving similar reports from his intelligence teams. The insect-like leader stood in his command center, watching displays that showed human fleet movements. Intelligence leader Vexstar. He called to his aide. What is the status of our analysis? Vexstar approached with quick, nervous steps. War Marshal, the humans are not what they appear to be. Their ships look primitive, but they're actually incredibly advanced. Explain. They build their ships from salvage materials and different technologies all mixed together. But this isn't because they're poor or desperate. It's because they're so experienced at war that they can make anything work. Crix examined the tactical displays. What do you mean? War Marshal. They've learned to fight with whatever they have available. Their ships can be repaired using parts from a dozen different sources. Their weapons can be modified in the field. They don't need perfect equipment because they're perfect at using imperfect equipment. That makes them more dangerous, not less. Exactly, sir. A fleet that needs specific parts and perfect conditions is vulnerable. a fleet that can adapt to anything is nearly impossible to defeat. Back on Harmony Point Station, the Joint Coalition Syndicate leadership was meeting again. This time, they had invited the humans to explain themselves. Colonel Steve Morgan sat across from the assembled leaders. He was a middle-aged man with gray hair and calm eyes, but when he spoke, everyone in the room listened carefully. "Gentlemen, ladies," Morgan began, "I understand you have questions about our intentions." Admiral Carter nodded. "Colonel, we've been analyzing your civilization's history. We're concerned about your military capabilities." Morgan smiled. "You should be. We're very good at what we do. What exactly do you want from us?" "We want to help you maintain the peace you've achieved. But we need you to understand something important. What you've been calling a war for the past 2 centuries wasn't really a war at all." War Marshal Crickstage spoke up. "What do you mean?" "I mean you've been playing a soldier, taking turns shooting at each other, following rules that don't exist in real warfare, trying to win without really hurting your enemy. We were fighting for important principles." Carter said, "I'm sure you were, but you were fighting like gentlemen. You were fighting with honor and restraint. You were fighting to make a point, not to achieve victory." Morgan leaned forward. "In real war, there's no honor. There's no restraint. There's only winning and losing. The winner gets to write the history books and decide what was honorable." The room was silent. Finally, Carter asked, "What makes you think you know better than us?" Morgan's expression grew serious. "Because we've been fighting real wars for 10,000 years. Wars where the survival of our entire species was at stake. Wars where losing meant extinction. Wars where we had to choose between being moral and being alive. And what did you choose? We chose to be alive, and then we chose to be moral. But we never forgot the lessons we learned about survival." Morgan stood up. "The peace you've achieved is fragile. It exists because both sides are tired of fighting, not because the causes of the conflict have been resolved. That kind of peace doesn't last. What do you suggest? Let us help you build a peace that will last. Not because people are tired of fighting, but because they're too afraid to start fighting again." Carter felt a chill. "What does that mean?" Morgan's smile was cold and final. "It means that sometimes the only way to ensure peace is to be so utterly devastating in war that no one dares to disturb the peace." The meeting ended with more questions than answers. But one thing was clear to everyone in the room: the humans hadn't come to join the galaxy's civilization. They had come to reshape it in their own image. And their image was forged in the fires of 10,000 years of war. 6 months after humanity's arrival, the galaxy was a different place. The old boundaries between Coalition and Syndicate space had become meaningless. Both civilizations were working together under something called the Galactic Defense Treaty. Captain Tony Williams commanded the first joint patrol ship, the Unity. Half his crew was Coalition, half was Syndicate, and all of them were learning new ways to think about space combat. Tony himself was human, assigned to help train the galactic forces in what the military called human doctrine. "Captain," said Lieutenant Mark Chen from the sensor station, "we're approaching the patrol zone. All systems show green." Tony nodded. Mark was Coalition, young and eager to learn. Next to him sat Syndicate sensor operator Zixel, an insect-like alien who had been fighting Coalition forces just months ago. Now they worked together like old friends. "Very good," Tony said. "Remember, we're not just patrolling for threats. We're showing everyone that the new peace is real and permanent." The Unity was an amazing ship. It combined the best technology from both sides with human improvements. Coalition shields protected Syndicate weapons systems. Human targeting computers guided energy beams that could punch through a small moon. But more importantly, the crew had learned to fight like humans. "Sir," said Communications Officer Lisa Park, "we're receiving a priority message from Galactic Command." "Put it through." The main screen showed General Carl Stone, now the first human representative to the Galactic Council. Behind him, Tony could see the flags of dozens of species, all working together under human guidance. "Captain Williams," Stone said, "we've got a situation developing in the Outer Rim. Unknown contacts approaching from outside the galaxy, large fleet, hostile intentions probable." Tony felt his pulse quicken. This was what they had been preparing for. "How large, sir?" "Initial estimates suggest over 500 ships. Energy signatures indicate advanced weapons technology. They're broadcasting what appears to be a demand for surrender. Orders, sir." Stone's expression was calm, but deadly serious. Take your patrol group and make contact. Find out what they want. But Tony, remember the new rules. Yes, sir. Establish superiority first. Negotiate from strength. Exactly. Show them what they're dealing with before they make any stupid decisions. The transmission ended. Tony turned to his crew. These people had learned fast. 6 months ago, they had been enemies fighting a polite, civilized war. Now they were something new, something dangerous. All stations, battle readiness, Tony ordered. This is not a drill. The Unity's crew moved with the smooth efficiency that humans had taught them. Every action had a purpose. Every movement was calculated to save seconds that might mean the difference between victory and defeat. Sir, Mark said, the patrol group is forming up around us. 12 ships total. Mix of coalition, syndicate, and human vessels. Tony smiled. 12 ships didn't sound like much against 500. But these weren't the same ships that had fought the old war. These ships had been rebuilt with human modifications. More importantly, their crews had been retrained with human tactics. The patrol group moved toward the unknown fleet at maximum speed. As they traveled, Tony thought about how much had changed. The coalition and syndicate had spent centuries learning how to fight fair. Humans had taught them how to fight to win. Contact in 30 minutes. Reported Zixel, enemy fleet is maintaining course toward Galactic Center. Any response to our standard greetings? Negative, sir. They're ignoring all communication attempts. Tony nodded. That was their choice. Humans had learned long ago that some people only understood one language, all ships. This is Unity. Tony broadcast to his patrol group. Remember your training. These unknowns have probably never encountered human military doctrine. We're going to give them a demonstration they won't forget. 20 minutes later, the unknown fleet came into visual range. Tony studied them on the main screen. The ships were huge, sleek, and obviously built for war. They moved in perfect formation. Their weapons already charged and ready, sir. Lisa said, they're broadcasting now. Audio only. Put it through. A harsh voice filled the bridge, speaking in a language the universal translator struggled with. When it finally came through, the message was simple and arrogant. Primitive species of this galaxy, you will surrender immediately. Your resistance is futile. We are the hegemony of Andromeda. We have conquered 1,000 civilizations. Submit, and some of you may be allowed to serve us. Tony looked around his bridge. His crew was waiting for orders, their faces calm and ready. These people had learned well. Lisa opened a channel to the hegemony fleet. Channel open, sir. Tony stood up, his voice carrying the cold confidence that all humans learn in military school. This is Captain Tony Williams of the Galactic Defense Force. You are entering protected space without permission. Turn around and leave immediately. The response was immediate and angry. Foolish primitive, we outnumber you 50-1. You dare threaten us? Tony smiled the same cold smile that General Stone had taught him. I'm not threatening you. I'm giving you one chance to leave peacefully. After that, we solve this problem permanently. You think 12 small ships can stand against our mighty fleet? No, Tony said calmly. I think 12 ships trained in human military doctrine can destroy your entire fleet in about 10 minutes. But we're willing to find out. There was silence from the hegemony fleet. Tony could imagine their commanders trying to understand what they were facing. They had probably conquered hundreds of civilizations using overwhelming numbers and superior technology. They had never encountered humans. This is your final warning, Tony continued. Leave now, or we will remove you. The galaxy is under Earth's protection, and we take that responsibility very seriously. The hegemony commander's voice returned. Now uncertain. Earth, we have no record of this Earth in our databases. That's because you've never fought anyone like us before, but you're about to learn. 5 tense minutes passed. Tony watched his sensors as the hegemony fleet hesitated, their formation becoming less perfect as individual ships began to show signs of uncertainty. Finally, the alien voice returned. We will consider your words. We require time to consult with our superiors. You have 24 hours, Tony said. After that, we consider your presence an act of war. The hegemony fleet slowly turned around and began moving back toward the edge of the galaxy. Tony watched them go, feeling a mixture of relief and disappointment. He had been curious to see how human tactics would work against a completely unknown enemy. Sir, Mark said, should we follow them? No need, Tony replied. They'll be back eventually. But next time they'll come to negotiate, not to conquer. Word will spread that this galaxy is protected. Tony sat back in his captain's chair. The old war between Coalition and Syndicate had lasted centuries, because both sides had been too civilized to win it decisively. The humans had ended that war not by fighting it, but by showing everyone what real war looked like. Now the galaxy was at peace, but it was a different kind of peace. Not the peace of exhaustion that had ended the old war, but the peace of strength. The peace that came from being so utterly devastating in warfare that no one dared to disturb it. Lisa, send a message to Galactic Command, Tony ordered. A known fleet has withdrawn. Situation resolved. Galaxy remains secure. As the Unity turned back toward home, Tony thought about what Admiral Campbell had said in that first transmission months ago. You haven't met humans yet. The galaxy was still learning what that truly meant. The hegemony would tell other civilizations about their encounter. Word would spread through Andromeda and beyond that this galaxy was protected by something new, something that understood war so completely that they had achieved perfect peace. The war was over before it began, just like humans preferred it.